Hello, this is Liza Rutherford and Campbell Rutherford, and we're making this video to help explain some of our homeschool journey that we've had, homeschooling and Braille Reader. I had a lot of questions in the Blind Homeschoolers group, so we're going to try to answer those. But first, I was going to explain how we got started homeschooling and a little bit about why and all, and what we did before we homeschooled. So, Campbell went to Montessori preschool from age 3 to 6. She did receive services in Montessori preschool. I think she got 1 hour a week.
Yes.
From a TVI. And that was supposed to be limited services. They told us in the IAP meeting that would be limited. And then in first grade, she went into the public school system, and she still just got 1 hour a week. So I'm guessing the Montessori wasn't really limited. But she did have an assistant in the classroom who knew Braille, and it was a friend of ours who worked at the school already, and agreed to be Campbell's aide and learned Braille the summer before first grade. So from first grade through fourth grade, she attended that elementary school mainstream with, everybody else in the classroom, and then that assistant in there as well. And then in fourth grade, the TVI that our district contracted 1 hour a week, we didn't actually have a TVI on staff at that time. There was one on staff when she was in preschool, and this lady was a teacher that was getting ready to retire and did like a summer session to learn to be a TVI, and I'm not sure she was qualified to teach a Braille reader. She never really introduced any Braille to Campbell, but anyway, she didn't last very long, and the lady they contracted from Tennessee School for the Blind is the one that Campbell had all the way through school. So that's who we got to see for 1 hour a week. And she worked with her first through fourth grade. And then in fourth grade, she was moving away to the school, work at the School for the Blind full time, which is 4 hours from us. So the school district was like, oh, we don't know what we're going to do. How about you just send her to the School for the Blind? And in that case, she would be bused there on Sundays and bused home on Fridays and live there during the week. And that was not an option for us. I'm just not cool with my kid living somewhere else every day. And so anyway, I talked to the superintendent of special education, and I said, well, when Campbell was little, we had considered homeschooling. We were told that we could not receive services as homeschoolers, but would you be willing to provide us with Braille materials and O&M and technology if we homeschool until you can find a TVI? And a TVI is teacher of the visually impaired. O&M is orientation and mobility, where you learn to walk with a cane and cross the street and that kind of stuff. So anyway, she agreed to it. And then for fifth grade, we just ordered the textbooks that the kids would be using in Campbell's fifth grade class. We did math and science and Braille. And then everything else we did a lit-based curriculum. And then Campbell just read the books on Bookshare.
We actually got the social studies textbook as well for that year, but I remember reading it and saying, Mom, this is so boring. I want real books. So we dropped that pretty soon, pretty quickly.
And the funny thing is, like, that was the year that she had to test. In our state, if you homeschool, you have to do standardized tests in 5th, 7th, and 9th grade. And so we used the public school curriculum for math and science, but we didn't for social studies. And what was the other, reading or something? Yeah. English language arts. And she scored higher on the ones that we didn't use their curriculum on, which I thought was funny, because that's when, everybody was kind of going nuts about testing, and that was when they first started telling teachers that their jobs depended on standardized test scores and all that, and it just was ridiculous. But anyway, she scored really well, but she scored high in everything, but she was higher in those two subjects, which we did not use their curriculum at all. What I did is I went online and got their scope and sequence so that we were studying the same time period and the same subject matters, and then we just I'd find book lists online and things like that to just learn the same topics, but using actual books instead of textbooks, like biographies and things like that. So anyway, we did that for 5th grade. Then Jefferson County just didn't hire anybody, and they just could not find a teacher that wanted to move here and be a part-time TVI. And I think that was probably the big problem, is that they wanted to hire someone part-time, and there's a worldwide shortage of TVI, so most of them aren't looking for part-time work in rural East Tennessee. So I guess that was a lot of it. And then the contract that we had been using with Tennessee School for the Blind, that funding got frozen, and so they didn't have any outreach teachers. I think we got 30 minutes a month.
Yeah.
Is that what it said on? I think that's what it said on her IEP, and that only happened once. It didn't even happen every month. We got 30 minutes one time from 5th grade through 8th grade, I'm pretty sure. So anyway, every year we would just order the math and science in Braille. And actually, we didn't even use the science anymore, did we?
No.
Until chemistry.
Biology. No, chemistry, really, yeah. Because we got biology, didn't use it.
And we wanted, and the main reason is because we needed the math. Campbell had a refreshable Braille display, Refresher Braille 18, that was purchased with federal quota funds. Homeschoolers do qualify for federal quota funds in our state. I'm guessing that might be the same in all states, but it may not be common knowledge. So the school district ordered that using the federal quota funds, and she used it from 5th grade till this past year when she got a chameleon, right?
Yeah.
And then we had a borrowed 40 cell Braille display. And what a Braille display does, for those of you who are not familiar, it's kind of like a keyboard. It's a Braille input, and then it has little pegs that come up and make Braille, and then they can go away, so it can constantly change. And it's sort of like a monitor and a keyboard combined, if you're thinking of how sighted people use a computer, and it just connects with Bluetooth. It's very handy because paper Braille is hard to get and expensive and huge to haul around. So refreshable Braille is really cool. So anyway, she got her first one of those in 5th grade. We used it some. I wouldn't say, we even have an embosser here at home that was the school system had purchased when she was in school, and they gave it to us to use. And of course we have to give it back when she graduates. But I only used it a handful of times. We did a homeschool co-op when she was in 8th grade, and she took Spanish, and I had to emboss her exams for that class. And it's not hard to use at all. It's just loud, and we just didn't, if it wasn't already in Braille, we didn't put it in Braille. We just used refreshable Braille, or I ordered the books in Braille, and we just used what we could. That's the benefit of homeschooling, is that you don't have a classroom teacher handing out worksheets that you have to emboss. So we just used what we had, and we didn't try to emboss anything extra.
Right. And in reality, I think that's actually closer to what college classes are like, because they don't give you so much busy work. And ultimately, that's what you're preparing for, college and beyond. So it's really not a loss to not have those worksheets to do.
Yeah. And we did do a co-op one time. This lady wanted us to do a word search for Spanish, and I was like, does she really need to complete a word search? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, okay, so let's try to braille this. So I just read the letters row by row to Campbell, and she brailled them onto a piece of paper. And then it was just tedious. Like, a lot of the problem with the co-op was that by the time I adapted the materials, the textbook, of course, was not available in braille, and it wasn't even digital, right?
Right, from what I
So
remember.
the teacher would try to take pictures of the pages of the textbook and send them to us, and we would try to use KNFB Reader, which was real glitchy. It had just come out at the time, and I mean, I think we were spending like 30 hours a week on this one class.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
But she did learn a lot, and it was fun, sort of socially. But it was just more work. Like, you could just, it's almost like, is it easier for me to tell you how to do your job or just do it for you? In that situation, it was easier for us just to do the class ourselves than to try to do the co-op. Um, for co-op classes, I would think as long as the materials could be digital, you could read it with digital braille, it might work better.
Yeah, and I think, like, if I did that class now, I probably would have an easier time of it. For one, because I could use the JAWS OCR, which I think is better than KNFB Reader. But secondly, all of the other materials besides the textbook, my instructor had available digitally because she taught an online class as well. And so before I had been accessing those on my phone with my little 18-cell braille display, but now that I rely on my computer and my Focus 40, it would be a lot easier, I think.
Yeah. Back then, she didn't know how to use a laptop yet. So that leads into the next thing. Somebody had asked a question about what does each device do that Campbell uses, and when do we recommend that you introduce them? I personally think that life would have been much easier if you'd had a braille display and a laptop, like maybe in third grade,
At least. Maybe
even before that.
Yeah, because you can even teach Braille on a Braille display to little kids. My instructors do it all the time, and then it saves having to emboss a whole bunch of stuff. If you have someone who's, really wild as a kid and might break the display, you may rely on paper Braille for a little bit longer, but I would definitely say really the only technology you need throughout school, or the most important technology I would say, would be the laptop, the Windows PC, and the Braille display, a 40-cell Braille display. I also would say, be sure you're familiar with using an iPhone or Apple devices, or maybe even Android now, because their accessibility is catching up. And I personally like to have a smaller Braille display, like the Chameleon that my mom mentioned, so that I can text with, like, carry it around in my purse and text with it if I need to. But that's more of that's not a necessity, I would say.
Yeah, and that leads to another question. Somebody asked, was it easier or harder to find blind peers and older role models as a homeschool family than it might have been in a different kind of school? And another person asked socially how that works. So just kind of explain that. Who you're texting all the time. That's why you have to have this little braille display in your purse.
Yeah. Actually, I think I found more blind role models and friends probably after I started homeschooling.
You just really didn't have a lot of time when you're in public school.
Exactly. It was, you go to school. I had to go there early because my grandmother would pick me up. She was a teacher, so I'd get to school at 7. Stay there till 3, sometimes 4 if I was staying after with my grandmother while mom worked. Come home, do about 4 hours worth of homework, shower, eat dinner, go to bed, do the exact same thing the next day, catch up on homework on the weekends, pretty much. So, I work a lot now, but I make my schedule, and it's my choice when I do things. So I do have time to socialize, and I've met several blind friends through summer camps, and I've met some on Facebook. Mom has introduced me to some blind homeschoolers, and just some I've met recently when I finally became less social media illiterate and got Facebook. I met some other blind people and parents of blind children. And then there's also an organization here in the Knoxville area called Club Vibes, and it's a group of blind and visually impaired people of all ages who kind of come together and mentor each other. And we do, before the pandemic, we did a lot of tandem biking and walks, like we did the subway walk for cancer, and we've done a few things like that. So I met a whole lot of people through that group. And then when I started taking tech lessons, assistive technology lessons, I made some great connections with mentors because all of my instructors were blind as well. So I made some really good connections with those people. So definitely not lacking in the social regard. And my social media illiteracy is my choice rather than a thing that has come from homeschooling. So
yeah, her dad, she wanted to do some kind of social media when she was in middle school, and my husband made her write a research paper about the effects of social media on teenagers, and then she made the choice herself to withdraw her request for social media at that time. So she didn't really get interested in it until we started talking about college applications and that whole process and what happens when an admission counselor Googles you. So, and how you need to have a social media presence for that.
Yeah.
Which my husband is still on the fence about, but he's a little antisocial in all ways. So anyway, socially, and she also met a lot of friends at summer camps. Yeah. So every summer she would go to camp at Tennessee School for the Blind, and she loved it and had so much fun, and she made lots of friends there. And then, I mean, she would never want to be a full-time student there, right?
No,
I mean,
never.
I'm not trying to speak for her. That's what she's told me, but she did love to go summer camp there. So, yeah. And then she did some camps with S.E.E.
Yeah, Student Enrichment Experience
in North Carolina. That's an incredible program, and they open their camps up to people from other states too. So you can, they have some day camps, but then they also have overnight camps. And she's done that several times. Her orientation and mobility instructor is actually part of that, and he is in the next. We live in Tennessee, and that's in North Carolina. That tells you what kind of shortage of O&M instructors we have. We drive to North Carolina for O&M, and the school district actually pays for that. We contract that out. How many lessons a year? Twice a month. 2 hours each session. So 4 hours a month.
I think we get 20 lessons a year. Is that right?
Something like that, because they don't count summer. So we've been doing that for 4 years.
Yes.
And she didn't have any O&M from 5th grade to 8th grade, except what she got at summer camp, because that contract that I talked about that Jefferson County had with Tennessee School for the Blind was frozen, and so there was no services. So for the IEP meeting going into 8th grade, I brought the list of requirements that you have to get a guide dog, the O&M skills you have to get a guide dog. And if you're not familiar, there are a lot of them. It's probably about 6 pages long, all the things you need to be able to do, and you can find that online. And Campbell could do maybe like 3 of the things of 6 pages of things, because she hadn't had any O&M training. I mean, she did fine. Of course, we were homeschoolers, so we didn't really go to a lot of, I mean, we live in a rural place. There aren't even sidewalks here. So it's not like we're crossing streets or riding public transportation and all that stuff, but she needed to learn to do those things for college and adult life. So anyway, I couldn't get that point across to these people for some reason. And so we took the requirements for a guide dog, because everybody loves the idea of a blind person having a guide dog. And so I was like, look, if Campbell ever wants to have a guide dog, she cannot. She is not qualified. She doesn't have any of these skills. If she applied right now, if she applied when she turned 16, she would be denied because she doesn't have enough O&M skills. And that's what got them to contract and start looking for an O&M instructor. They found this guy in North Carolina, and he's been incredible. I cannot recommend him enough.
Yes, he's amazing.
Yeah, and Campbell can cross like 7 lanes of traffic. I don't watch because it freaks me out a little bit just watching, but Jay stays like 50 feet behind her, and she walks all over Asheville. And it's been great. So the school district does cover that, and then we took 10 meetings to get them to cover assistive technology training, because then we had to convince them that, yeah, a blind person needs to use a PC just like everyone else.
Right. This was over about 2 years, I believe.
Yeah. So, and those lessons are not cheap. So we could not afford to fund those ourselves. We needed their help. And we knew that they got each school district in our area in Tennessee. I don't know. I guess in every state's like this. They get so much money per student who has an IEP. So say, for example, in public school, kids with no disabilities, they get maybe, say, $8,000 a year for each kid. Well, for a kid with an IEP, they might get $11,000. So a kid who's homeschooled or private schooled in that district, they still get money for that kid if they have an IEP. So we knew that money was there, and they weren't spending it because the books that we got from them were borrowed. They weren't creating any materials for Campbell, so we just borrowed them we would just email the lady every spring and say, these are the classes Campbell's going to take. What Braille books do you have for physics or chemistry or whatever? And she would say, these are the ones, and I would look to see which one had the cheapest teacher's manual on Amazon, and I would order that, and we would order those books. That's how we decided what math and science curriculum to use. It wasn't, and it worked fine.
Yeah.
So anyway, that money, they can use it for other things, and we knew that they had that money that they could use to pay for assistive technology.
And they did spend it on a $6,000 Braille note taker, which I do not recommend going that route. It ends up just being a crutch.
Yeah. So we were advised by an assistive technology instructor that we had before she started working with TechVision to get her a note taker because it could do more things than just a Braille display. So we did, but then when she got up to, say, Algebra 2, going into pre-calculus, it could not handle that level of math, and it would lay out things very weird. Like, she would type in problems, and they would be all different fonts. Some stuff would be centered, some stuff would be over to the left, some stuff would be over to the right. So, like, if I was a sighted teacher with 30 other kids in the classroom and I got that homework, it would not be, I could figure out what she was trying to say, but it would be a lot of extra work for me.
Right. And I would like to make something clear. There's kind of this mentality around, especially in the STEM field when it comes to blind people, that when you're doing something in class, when you're presenting your work, you present it the best way that works for you, and it's your teacher's job just to figure it out, like what you're trying to say. And I don't think that that's true, because the best thing you can possibly do for yourself and for your teacher and for your future employer is to make yourself as mainstream as possible when it comes to technology, because the more specialized you are, the more technology you have that sighted people don't have or can't use, the less competitive you're going to be on the job market. And honestly, you don't want to make it harder for college professors than it already is, because that's just going to, I think, inspire a negative attitude toward having a blind student in their classroom. So absolutely make sure you learn to present all of your work in as mainstream a way as possible to prepare for college and employment. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think so. And I think in elementary school, especially, the trend, which this may not apply to homeschoolers, but I know the trend in public school and even at schools for the blind is to throw a note taker into the mix first, which isn't necessarily a bad thing if it doesn't become the only thing. Like, it's almost like if you just taught a sighted kid to use an iPad, and you said, okay, since you know how to use an iPad, you really don't need to learn how to use a computer. I mean, like, you can do your job. You can go to college just using an iPad. And you can get a job and in your interview say, I don't know how to use a PC, but I can use an iPad. So that's basically what you're doing to the blind kid by just letting them use a note taker and not teaching them to use a laptop as well. So the reason we're kind of adamant that you just skip the note taker is because they're like $6,000 and they're not even as powerful as an iPad.
Right.
So like you could pair an iPad with a Braille display and you'd have the same thing as a note taker and it would be way more powerful.
Right.
And sighted people could use it with you.
Yeah. And those $6,000 could have been spent on 2.5 or 3 more years of worth of tech lessons for me, based on what they paid for eventually.
Yeah. And then they become obsolete. Like that one that she got her freshman year, they don't even make it anymore.
Right, they've got a new one now.
They've got a new version out. So, I mean, the less bells and whistles, the better, kind of. Just like when you buy a refrigerator nowadays, if it does all kinds of stuff, that's just more stuff to tear up and more things that have to be updated. If you just have the old school one with an ice maker, it's going to last you 30 years. That's kind of how it is with these Braille displays. A Focus 40, Campbell, I have a picture of Campbell playing with one at a conference when she was 10. And the one that she just got at 18 looks almost exactly the same and does almost exactly the same stuff. Right. I mean, it's been updated a little, but if she'd gotten that one at 10, it would still work.
Right. And it's not because those technologies aren't updated enough, it's because it's a good model and it works. And
it doesn't have to do as much as a note taker. It doesn't hold the whole computer in it.
Right.
Like it just attaches to other computers like a keyboard. And it's only how much does one cost? Like
about
$2,800 or something.
Yeah, which is fairly cheap for a Braille display.
Yeah. And so for less than half of what this note taker, so you can afford that, an iPad and a laptop, an Apple Watch, which is also accessible, and an iPhone. for what one note taker would cost, and that would be all you would need. And now someone did ask why Campbell uses the Perkins Brailler, because I had posted a picture of her doing her math on the Perkins. I always say it's like the equivalent of a sighted person using a pencil and paper to write out math. Like, how many of us want to type our math problems out and as we're working them?
Right. So I did try using a system where I used the scratch pad on my Braille display, which is like just where you can type in Braille and read it that way. So I tried using that for math, and that system worked pretty well up until calculus. But then with calculus, I mean, sometimes you've got pages of stuff that you're dealing with. I haven't gotten into too much of that yet, but it can be pretty long. So for both Calc 1 and Calc 2, I definitely relied on my Braille writer, and it actually kind of took some persuasion from my Calc tutor who's been a blind math professor for over 50 years, and she is a very tech savvy person. She's got graduate degrees in computer science and mathematics, and so she was advocating that I do my work on paper. I should probably do it on paper. So she showed me, the best ways to space everything out to make sure I keep track of all my work. And so I do all of that using the Braille writer as my sort of scratch paper. And then I read that and copy it onto my work, onto my document, like for a test. And it's actually a pretty nice proofreading system. I've caught several mistakes of mine that way. And I've been getting consistently high test scores for calculus too. I took AP Calc last year, so the only test I had was the AP exam. But I think this method has been working for me in Calc 2 as well.
So that explains that. Here's a question. What would each of you say was the most helpful or important thing you did or learned, taught in the first year or two of homeschool? I think for us, learning, for me, I think it was letting Campbell choose what classes she was interested in, what topics she wanted to learn, and then just finding book lists for that. And then Campbell can read using Bookshare and Voice Dream Reader. Bookshare is a free online library for blind and dyslexic children, students, or children with print disabilities. I guess there are other ones besides those two. And then we also use Bard, which is also another free library. Yes. But getting away from the textbook and going into a lit-based curriculum has been great for both of my kids. My sighted kid likes workbooks for, say, math and grammar, but we use lit-based for everything else. We use a lot of Guest Hollow for science and history. They even have in English. We use Brave Writer for language arts.
Mm-hmm. And that's been very good.
It's been really good. Campbell only used Brave Writer, and it seems real light. Like, it seems like you're not doing a lot. We did that from, 6th grade on?
Mm-hmm.
And she scored a perfect score on the ACT in reading, English, and writing. And I'm serious, like, I remember English from school, and it was so tedious, like learning comma rules and, parts of speech, diagramming sentences, all that stuff. Brave Writer doesn't have any of that. And here we are with perfect scores in those areas.
Of course, I will say that Miss Gann's comma rules cheat sheet was pretty great.
Yes.
My mom's high school English teacher has a comma rules sheet. And honestly, in my opinion, all you really need for English in high school is a comma rules cheat sheet like that and as many books as you can possibly read. Because
I think that's probably why she's a good writer, is because she's read so much.
I read all the time. Reading is my primary form of entertainment. So, and I do it while I'm doing other stuff. So I do it in the morning when I'm getting ready. I do it when I'm eating lunch. I do it when I'm doing laundry. So I read all the time.
She also uses bone conduction headphones, which that's a great Christmas gift for your kiddos. Yes. It doesn't go over the ear. It sits right here on this bone. So it doesn't go inside your ear like an earbud, but it doesn't go all the way over your ear. Now, she does use those all the way over ones when you're doing things where you need to have sound canceled outside.
Right.
But like for traveling, O&M, listening to Google Maps or Soundscape, is that the name of it?
Yeah.
And Blind Square.
Yeah, or for taking notes in class, also in my college classes now, dual enrollment.
So she can hear both what's going on and what's going through the headset at the same time, because it's not actually covering your ear hole.
Right, and I don't have to wear one earbud, which starts to fall out after a while.
Yeah. So she uses those and reads all the time, and I can't see them because she's got so much hair, so I never know if she's got them in or not. And I try to talk to her, and she's listening to something. She has to pause whatever, and I have to repeat myself over and over. So I think that was the main thing, is learning to love books. Up to that point, Campbell had you even really use Bookshare very much.
Only for a couple of books in school on that school
She just didn't
iPod
have
that they
time.
had. Yeah.
Like, she did not have time to do anything when she was in public school except schoolwork.
Yeah.
And I was working. That was another question somebody asked. Yes, I had 3 jobs. I owned a dance studio for 16 years, and then I was a middle school dance team coach, which we did football and basketball season, so that was a year-round commitment. And then I choreograph one musical every year that starts in September, and our show's in March, and that's like 2 rehearsals a week too. So I worked all 3 of those jobs while I homeschooled for the first
3 years.
3 years. Then I resigned from the coaching position. Not really related to homeschooling, but kind of. That was the school Campbell was zoned for, and the administration was just really bad. So I was just like, yeah, I don't want to work here anymore. So I resigned from that. And then when she was 13, I retired. I sold my dance studio. So now I just do the choreography. So I did work, but my schedule, like I don't go in till like kids get out of school because they can't take dance class in the middle of the day. So I was home all day, but then I worked till like 10 at night. So basically like a second shift situation. And it's hard to work in homeschool, I guess, but not like what you would think. It's just tiring.
Yeah.
I think mostly she does her work independently. Like, I'm just here to facilitate, to answer questions, to make sure she has the material she needs.
Right. And my younger sister does too. I think some people might think that people doing work independently or students doing work independently only works for like super compliant, non-energetic kids. But my sister is completely opposite to me in personality. And
She's sitting over here. I don't know if she wants to be on the camera.
But yeah, she does all her work on her own too. And
I think it's a great skill because going into college, like Campbell took a dual enrollment class last year. She's in 2 dual enrollment classes right now, but her first ones were last year. And like, she would be the only kid that showed up for the lectures because it was during the pandemic and it was all virtual. The lectures were virtual and they were optional, but it was Spanish. So like, you're not going to hear the teacher say the words unless you go to the lecture.
Yeah.
So she would be literally, it'd be like her and 2 other kids. And then eventually it was just her.
Yeah. So I got like private lessons from this Spanish professor and it was great because she was like extremely good. So,
but I think because you've always had to do, like, I just let her set her own schedule. She knows I have to be finished with this math book by June because we have to give it back. So this is how many lessons a day I need to do. And this,
Right.
And she kind of just paces herself. Harris is the same way. She knows she has to be finished by a certain time. And she does a lesson a day and just move on to the next thing. And it's not that hard, really. I mean, like, honestly, I was spending as a parent more time doing homework than I spend doing homeschool. When she was in public school, navigating the homework situation was way harder.
Yeah,
than homeschooling.
Yeah, and I stayed sick all the time too in public school, so we always had to keep on makeup work and and
field trips and meetings and PTA and all the things.
Yeah, and I don't think I learned until I started homeschooling that I'm fairly introverted, not necessarily shy, but introverted, because I kind of need to have time to myself, to recharge and just downtime. And I never got that in public school. I was constantly around people from 7 to 4 in the daytime and then having to do homework. And so I was tired. I stayed sick all the time. I had chronic headaches. It was just not the best environment for me, I think. And so I've really been able to, it sounds so cheesy, I hate saying this, but I've been able to discover more of the kind of person that I need to be, rather than just trying to survive, through homeschool. So I think that's been good for me because it's allowed me to do a lot of personal development and stuff. So there's your inspirational quote for the day.
She's mid writing college application essays, and they're all that kind of stuff, like wanting to know how inspiring you are. So
yeah, I'm so sick of it. I'm almost done. I'm so glad.
So this question, somebody wants to know about early on. Do we think, how important was the preschool, kindergarten, all of that stuff, being that you did that in public school? How important was that to your Braille literacy, probably, do you think? So here, let me just say that she only got, which I talked about earlier, she only got 1 hour a week of Braille from a TVI. So that TVI would leave lesson plans for me, and for me to type, like the early readers that the rest of the class was using, and different assignments like that for Campbell. So then we would go an hour before school every day, before the other kids got there, because distractions and Braille lessons do not go well together. So we would have to get there before the other kids and then do her Braille lesson there. I don't know why I didn't think I could just do it at home, but I guess just the change of environment, and we just left all the materials there and did it there before school every morning.
Yeah.
So technically, we were already homeschooling, sort of. Like, we still just got 1 hour a week of Braille.
Yeah.
And we did it ourselves, and that's how she learned Braille.
Yeah. I will say the Montessori school was very good for me, but you can get Montessori materials for homeschoolers, I think.
Yeah,
online.
it's basically just a multi-sensory approach to learning. Instead of, hey, let's write your alphabet, you had a movable alphabet. Instead of writing out math problems, you have beads and spindle boxes and things like that to count.
And to learn different sounds of the alphabet. I remember there was a basket of different
manipulatives.
Like little figurines and stuff that represented each letter of the alphabet. And I learned pouring and
how to work a screwdriver,
washing dishes, and
sorting lots of things like buttons, seashells, beans,
and
all of that's pre-Braille skills.
Yeah.
And she did a lot of that in the Montessori classroom, which I didn't have to set up and everything.
Yeah, they also had a lot of really good geometry stuff. So if you talk to blind people, you hear a lot of them say they struggled a lot in geometry because it's all three-dimensional awareness. And tactile graphics of three-dimensional figures are not fun. So I learned about how much a cubic centimeter was by this little tower of blocks we had, with the bottom being 10 cubic centimeters and the top being 1 cubic centimeter. And then there was this basket of different three-dimensional solids called the geometric solids, or geometric salads, as I used to call them.
She thought it was because it was in a big bowl. And I would say, what'd you work on today? And she'd say the geometric salad.
Yeah, and so I learned about, cubes, rectangular prisms, triangular prisms, spheres, all of that when I was in preschool. And then they had this activity where you had an equilateral triangle, you had a bunch of like isosceles and scalene triangles, and then smaller equilateral triangles. You had to put those all on top of each other to make a stack of equilateral triangles. And so they're teaching you trigonometry when you're in preschool and kindergarten through a puzzle, essentially. And I remember all of that, and it helped me so much in geometry. And I really didn't struggle at all in geometry, I don't think.
And then like in geography, they have these puzzle maps that were already accessible, basically. I mean, the control isn't accessible, but you move the puzzle pieces too. But everything was pretty accessible. And and it was a really good experience. So she did that for 2 years of preschool and then kindergarten.
Yeah, and then I received some tutoring from that Montessori teacher in first grade as
during
well.
the transition from from Montessori to first grade public school. We did tutoring there. So I do think that Montessori background was great. With my sighted daughter, we only did 1.5 years of Montessori because we moved, and it was like 90 miles of driving a day to get her back and forth. But she also has that same background that's really, really good to build on in the homeschool, I feel like.
Especially when it comes to math, because when you're dealing with Montessori hands-on stuff, the numbers are actual quantifiable objects that you're working with rather than just abstract concepts. So Harris and I both do a lot of math in our heads, and I think probably part of the reason we can do that is because of that Montessori background.
Yeah, I think so too, because I'm not good at math. I can't do the math
and
that they can do.
And even Dad, who's good at math, doesn't do as much in his head as we do, I don't think.
Yeah, I think it's a great background for math. I don't know about literacy. I think because they learn the sounds of the letters first before they learn the names of the letters, I'm guessing I personally think that helps them both be good readers. And they're very phonetic spellers. Even when they misspell a word, it's phonetically correct. Do you know what I mean? So it's, I think it was great. As far as Braille goes, we did patterns. I think you could implement that at home. But as far as the learning the sounds, it's as simple as playing I Spy. And you just, like at dinner, we would say, I spy with my little eye something that starts with a T. And you say T instead of T. Something that starts with a V instead of V. You know what I mean? So I didn't learn to read that way. We learned the names of the letters first, and they still teach the kids that in public school. So it's a little bit of a transition, teaching, calling them the sounds instead of calling them their names. But I think that probably helped a lot too, don't you, Campbell?
Yeah. And a bonus when I was little was that it made I Spy automatically accessible to me.
Yeah, because she didn't have to see the colors or whatever. So we did sounds instead. So yeah, that's pretty simple. You could just do that at home and get the same skill. Let's see. I think that's about all of it. That somebody asked what tech you used early on. We kind of talked about that. She didn't have any tech till like 5th grade.
Right. I will say it's probably good to learn to use a talking graphing calculator like the TI-84 when you're in high school, because that's typically what they're going to let you have on tests in college.
And for the ACT.
Right. And that's probably the only extra piece of technology besides the Braille display and computer that I would say you need to learn to use. And it's not really that difficult. Also, when it comes to assistive technology, we had mentioned that the tech lessons are extremely expensive. That is true, but we also did not know about all of the free resources that are out there.
Freedom Scientific alone, just their website is nuts. How much stuff we could have gotten for free and didn't know it.
Yeah, Freedom Scientific is phenomenal when it comes to...
And then TechVision has like 500 something videos on YouTube.
Yeah, and APH has a bunch of webinars also. So if we had just used all of the free materials that were there and then networked with people on those webinars, we probably would have gotten pretty far as tech goes.
Yeah. It's pretty technical how she does math. There are different codes that she types in, so you have regular Braille, literary Braille, and you have 2 versions of that. This is all kind of sounds overwhelming, I know, when you first start, but it's just second nature now. There's grade 1 Braille, which is just like the alphabet and punctuation, like we use in print. And then there's grade 2 Braille, which is there are about 230 shorthand contractions, just to make things smaller and shorter in Braille. And then there's Nemeth, which is the math code that everyone should be using, not UEB math, because when you get to AP classes, they don't even offer AP exams in UEB math because you can't do the math.
Yeah, UEB math.
At that level with UEB math. So why in the world they make kids learn UEB math when they're little, and then when they get to high school, they're going to have to learn Nemeth, because if they want to take anything harder than Algebra 2.
Right, and then they hate it because it's new and they're having to learn it alongside their schoolwork, and then it makes them hate math and science. And I mean, I work with high school students, so I've seen it, and
and it's unfortunate because some sighted person made that decision, I'm guessing.
I'm sure.
Without taking into account that there are blind people who want to do careers that involve math.
Right.
So, anyway, it's kind of like whoever decided Common Core math was a great idea, for the sighted kids. It's just one of those things that somebody made the decision that probably wasn't qualified to make that decision. But that's a personal opinion. You can ask other people how they feel about it too. I've seen TVI say, "Oh no, you can do upper level math," and I'm like, "Are you talking beyond Algebra 2?" And they're like, "Well, no." So, I have yet to hear anybody say that they can do calculus with UEB math. So we shall see how that plays out. It's still kind of new.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think we answered all the questions. This is almost an hour long, so sorry about that. But y'all had a lot of questions, and we can do more videos if you have more. So just leave your questions in the comments, and we will try to get to them. We're rounding out this is our 9th year homeschooling, and she's going to graduate in May. So we figured we better start sharing the information that we've learned now before she goes away to school and isn't available to give that advice.
Yeah. And I can put some links in the description to some of the resources that we discussed, like the Freedom Scientific, APH webinars, and all of that.
And I know a lot of that sounds like a lot of acronyms. And whenever we first started learning all of this stuff when Campbell was little, it was very overwhelming. But it's really not when you get into it. Just take it one step at a time.
Right.
And homeschooling is way easier than trying to navigate all this in the public school system. So those of you who were asking me questions about, whether or not we feel like this was the right decision, I think it definitely was for everybody involved. Our district had no clue what to do with the Braille reader, and it was just going to be a battle. So,
yeah. I personally would, if every student could be homeschooled, every blind or sighted student could be homeschooled in a situation like mine, I would advocate it. So I'm a strong homeschool advocate for anyone, not just blind students. But yeah, I definitely think it made things so much easier. And I've been so much happier, too, being homeschooled than I ever was before.
Yeah. And a lot more free time to do what she wants to do. I think I went through her Bookshare account, and I think she had read 1,600 books since 8th grade. So that would have not happened if she'd been in public school with the amount of work she would have had to do. And this is with her still taking, 5 AP exam, 6 AP classes, and 6 dual enrollment classes by the time you graduate.
8 dual enrollment.
8 dual enrollment classes. So
wait, no, 6. You're right.
It's not like she's taking the easy route either. She'll have 40-something college classes, but then she still has free time to socialize and read and play piano and compete in music and all the things.
And be my nerdy self, I guess.
And to be close to your family.
Yes.
My kids are 6 years apart, so they would have never gone to the same school, and they would rarely see each other if we didn't homeschool. So I think that alone is worth it, probably.
Yeah. We still sit and watch Phineas and Ferb when we both need to chill.
So yeah, definitely worth it. And we didn't go into it intending to homeschool, but I'm glad it happened that way.
Yeah, as am I.
All right. Well, sorry we took so long. And let us know if you have any questions. Thanks.
Bye.